Ohio State would not be better with Kyle McCord this year, and here's why. Let's just make this clear. This is not going to be a Kyle McCord hate video. We're not going to go into this and hating on Kyle McCord and talking about how terrible he is and all this stuff. And in fact, I don't even think Kyle McCord is terrible. I think Kyle McCord is a good college quarterback. However, he just would not be the correct fit for Ohio State this year. So the thing we're going to look at in this video is, would Kyle McCord be a better fit for Ohio State than Devin Brown or Will Howard? Obviously, judging by the title, you know where I stand, but there is a lot of chatter out there that Ohio State moved on from Kyle McCord, and it was the wrong choice because of different factors. One is some of the spring game highlights that's coming out of Syracuse right now. Obviously, he made some good throws. There were some catches made by some receivers, some big gains, things like that, so everybody is getting excited about that, as they should. Syracuse fans should be excited for a five-star quarterback, somebody that was under the Ryan Day pedigree system, to be able to come in and deliver a good, potent offense for them. In addition to that, they have a bunch of other transfers coming in, and they have the returning running back who I think was a 1,000-yard rusher last year. So things are looking up for Syracuse. They should be excited about what's going on, but at the end of the day, that's good for Syracuse. It doesn't need to impact Ohio State. Another thing that is adding to this factor is Mel Kiper put out his 2025 NFL draft. The 2024 NFL draft hasn't even happened yet, but Mel Kiper has put out his 2025 NFL draft big board, and he has his top QB as Kyle McCord. And so obviously this is getting people talking, saying, oh my gosh, Ohio State moved on from the best quarterback in the 2025 draft. I'll remind you that before the 2023 draft, I think it was 2023 or 2020, 2023 draft, Spencer Rattler was ahead of CJ Stroud. So let's not take all that into too much account when we're thinking about this. There's still an entire season to be played. We'll see what happens. Also, this is going to be a main talking point for rival fans. If you are an Ohio State fan, you are going to get this from Michigan fans. You're going to get this from Georgia fans. You're going to get this from anybody and everybody, because guess what? When you're on top, people like to poke fun at you. And even though Ohio State hasn't won the Big Ten in the last few years, and even though Ohio State hasn't won the national championship in the past few years, this is still a top 5 program in college football, and this is one that everybody is chasing after. Even the teams that win it, like a Washington, like a Michigan, they are still chasing after this program because of the consistency and what Ohio State is able to do year in and year out. It says a lot about your program when an 11-2 season is considered a terrible, sky is falling, we need to fire our coach kind of season. But at the end of the day, let's talk about McCord. McCord has improved. I watched the entire Syracuse spring game, which he played a good amount for. I thought he was maybe just going to play the first quarter, but he played much more than that. McCord has improved. He has better pocket awareness. He is more comfortable back there. He was more decisive. He had better timing in some of his routes. Now, again, this is a spring game, and this is the Syracuse defense. How much did the Syracuse defense really add? They were talking, I think it was with Fran Brown on the sideline, and he even said they were catering things a little bit more to the offense in this game. So at the end of the day, I don't want to take anything away from Kyle McCord. He looked better. And so at the end of the day, I'll say that he improved. He was more accurate throwing the ball over the middle of the field. He did struggle with accuracy, even on a few of his highlights. I know there were some people nitpicking, it was a little behind him, a little this, a little that. At the end of the day, he had clean pockets. He was throwing, and he looked more comfortable. There was even one throw when he stepped up in the pocket, did a very good job of driving the ball with his feet and making a good, strong throw. Looked like his arm strength increased a little bit as well. But overall, Kyle McCord does look better. It looks like he had a very good offseason, and I'm happy for him that he looks better. I'm happy that he is thriving, it seems like, at Syracuse. But would Kyle McCord have looked better against the Ohio State defense? I'm not trying to say that he hasn't improved or anything, but let's also take into account who Kyle McCord was playing against in this spring game. Sadly, no one on Syracuse's schedule is going to come even close to Ohio State's defense this year. I think the best team they play on their schedule is Miami. Seriously, go look at it. It would not shock me if Syracuse goes 11-1, 10-2, possibly even 12-0 this season. I don't think they'll go 12-0, but I would not be surprised if they had a double-digit win season this year. Ohio State has arguably the best D-line and the best secondary in the nation in 2024. That's what Will Howard and Devin Brown were having to throw up against. Now, the one drive Devin Brown was against, some third stringers, kind of walk-ons, and he also had some third stringers and walk-ons he was throwing to, so it kind of evened out there. But at the end of the day, Will Howard for 2 drives and Devin Brown for 1 drive had to throw against possibly the best defense in the nation, and there was a good amount of running that happened, and let's just be honest. That wouldn't be Kyle McCord's forte. We'll get into that a little bit more. And then also, I think there's another thing we need to realize going into this season. Kyle McCord had Marvin Harrison Jr. We'll talk more about this later on. Ohio State this year has possibly the second weakest wide receiver room ever under Brian Hartline. 2019 might be the weakest just because Garrett Wilson was a freshman. Chris Olave was the leading wide receiver or pass catcher that year. And this year for Ohio State, this might be the second weakest Brian Hartline has ever had it. I'm not saying that's a definite thing because at the end of the day, we still need to see what happens this year. I really like Carnell Tate. I really like Brandon Ennis. And I think Jeremiah Smith is going to have a very good year for a freshman. And Emeka Egbuka obviously is somebody that I think is a first round pick. Says a lot about your coaching pedigree if your second weakest wide receiver room you've ever had still has a first round pick in it, but that's just me. Anyway, let's move on to some of the thoughts that there is going to be about Kyle McCord. If Kyle McCord has better stats, people will say that Ohio State made a mistake and that the Ohio State should not have gone with Kyle McCord. Or should not have gone with Will Howard or Devin Brown, that Kyle McCord is a better choice. Let's just stop this nonsense. It is nonsense to say that just because somebody has better stats, which Kyle McCord probably will have better stats than Will Howard or Devin Brown. I'll explain that a little bit later on. But just because somebody has better stats does not mean they are a better player. If that were the case, McCord would have been better than J.J. McCarthy last year. McCord had better stats than J.J. McCarthy. Now, everybody knows that McCord leaned upon Marvin Harrison Jr. a little bit more, and McCarthy had his legs, which made him a harder threat for the defense to be able to go after. And so at the end of the day, that was a big factor of why J.J. McCarthy was a better quarterback and is still a better quarterback than Kyle McCord. If stats were the case, Austin Reed would be a better quarterback from Western Kentucky than C.J. Stroud in 2002. They had about the same touchdown passes, and Austin Reed had, I think, 500, 600 more passing yards, something like that, than C.J. Stroud. If wins, and now I don't think Syracuse is going to win more games than Ohio State this year, but even if wins, say Syracuse somehow does have more wins, Syracuse goes 12-0 and Ohio State goes 11-1 or something like that. Let's also remember that Skyler Howard he had 10 wins back in, 2000, whatever it was, and Patrick Mahomes was 5-7 his senior year. Is Skyler Howard a better quarterback than Patrick Mahomes? No, of course not. Just because wins is not a definite QB stat. Wins is definitely something you want to think about when it comes to QBs, but it's not like this definite QB stat like touchdown passes because there's so much more that goes into it. Let's also realize, like I made the point about J.J. McCarthy with his running ability, that Ohio State's going to be running the quarterback far more this season. There's a reason why they went after a Will Howard, somebody who has legs and has durability with their size to be able to stand some hits. Devin Brown even came in as a red zone package QB to run for Kyle McCord last year. So this is not a situation where Kyle McCord just beat out Devin Brown and he never even stood a chance of sniffing the field. Will Howard and Devin Brown definitely have aspects of their game that is better than Kyle McCord. And so it doesn't really make sense to say, well, just because Kyle McCord has better passing stats, that he's a better overall player. Again, stats don't really mean all that much when you're talking about who is the better player. They are definitely a talking point, but it's not the end all be all. Let's also talk about how Kyle McCord would not fit Chip Kelly's system. Chip Kelly, he is somebody who requires a QB that is a running threat into his system. With his run pass option, how much he is willing to run the read option, things like that, he needs the quarterback to have a threat of running the ball. Kyle McCord, unfortunately, does not present that threat. And so even if Kyle McCord were here, he would not be the best system fit for Chip Kelly and what he wants to do. Will Howard is somebody who is more durable because of his size and is more athletic and able to run with his feet. McCord struggled with pre-snap reads at time. Chip Kelly's system requires you to make pre-snap reads so that you can run this RPO system that he likes to implement. Howard has been a starter. This is somebody that should be able to have the RPO decision making, the pre-snap reads, stuff like that, so that way he is able to make the correct decisions. That's something that Kyle McCord did struggle with. We didn't really see a ton of that in the spring game. It's hard to disguise things when you see this team all the time, so we'll see how much Kyle McCord improves there, but I'm still confident in Will Howard's ability. It's yet to be seen with Devin Brown, just because we've not seen as much of him, but I'm pretty confident in Will Howard's ability to do something like that. And also, too, in this system, there's no bailout wide receiver. There's no Marvin Harrison to just chuck the ball up to and hope for the best. That is such a luxury in the college football game when you have a receiver like a Marvin Harrison Jr. who doesn't just specialize in running and getting open. You have to find him and then put the ball in the right spot. But a lot of times you can just throw the ball up there, and he has such good body control and such a magnet for the ball that he's able to do the things that he's able to do with bringing the ball down against some better defenders. Now, Jeremiah Smith might turn into that. However, he's still young. He's still a freshman. I don't think you can expect that from him this year. Another piece of this is Bill O'Brien. I've heard people say, well, if Bill O'Brien was here, yeah, if Bill O'Brien was here, maybe, but he's not here. So at the end of the day, sure, maybe Kyle McCord would be better if Bill O'Brien was the offensive coordinator. We could talk about that, but at the end of the day, he's not there. So it's not really that big of a discussion point. Another piece about Kyle McCord, and again, this is not a hating on him segment. This is purely looking at would he be better at Ohio State. I don't know if Kyle McCord was ever truly happy last year. Kirk Barton on his Buckeye Scoop podcast said that Kyle McCord had the worst year of his life. Now, take Kirk Barton for what you think, and if you don't believe him, that's fine, whatever. But according to him, he did not have a very good year emotionally. He did not enjoy the year last year. And while I don't know if it was the worst year of his life, I think that by watching the games, you could see he wasn't having a good time. He wasn't having fun. There was hardly ever times when he was having a good time with his teammates and running and jumping and talking with them about that stuff. And so at the end of the day, if Kyle McCord isn't happy here, he's not going to play up to his best abilities here. He might enjoy his teammates, he might enjoy his coaches, but if he has a hard time being here, whether that's because of the fans, whether that's because he doesn't, it's too far away from home, whether it just doesn't feel like home, whatever it might be, there might be a myriad of reasons why Kyle McCord is not going to do well if he's not truly happy here. He endured heavy criticism, and some deal well with that, some don't. That doesn't make you tough. That doesn't make you strong or whatever. Just some people do and some people don't. CJ Stroud was very vocal about how Ohio State fans had heavy criticism for him and how much he struggled with that and how hard that was. But CJ Stroud was eventually able to overcome that, and now he considers Ohio State some of the best years of his life. He comes back and talks about Ryan Day and how much he meant to him, how much he talks to him, and how much he taught him. And so Ohio State fans' passion is great, and even though it is great, sometimes it's not for everybody. Sometimes it can be a little bit too much. Sometimes it can be hard for somebody to go through, and at the end of the day, that's just not for everybody sometimes. Doesn't make them better, doesn't make them worse. It's just not for everybody. Sometimes it's just not the right fit. Thankfully for CJ Stroud, it was the right fit, and so at the end of the day, it was good for him, but it never really seemed like it was the right fit for Kyle McCord. Let's get into some misconceptions really fast. Misconception number one, Ryan Day told Kyle McCord to leave. There's not a single credible report out there saying that Ryan Day told Kyle McCord to leave. There are some Michigan reporters that have talked about this in some of their articles. However, Michigan reporters are just going off of this idea. They don't have any sources, any sourcing to benefit this point and say that it's true. They're just going off of what they think. If you look at the actual people who are covering Ohio State, who are generally very honest about Ohio State, and we'll talk about the good and the bad. It's not just a fluff piece system. There's so much media out there. People will talk about it and how much Ohio State is covered in the national media as well. This was most likely accepted as Kyle McCord was going to be in a competition with whoever the next quarterback was that was brought in, or Devin Brown. And Kyle McCord decided that he did not want to have an open competition for the 2024 starting quarterback job. Again, that doesn't mean he's a bad quarterback or anything like that. He was thinking about his senior year and decided, I want to go somewhere where I am assured the job more. And so that's what he did. This was reported by the Columbus Dispatch that McCord departed because he feared he would be the backup quarterback in 2024 if he remained. Go look it up. The Columbus Dispatch has it. Both Howard and Brown have stuck around to compete. These are both guys who want to be here, want to compete. Again, not saying that that's a knock on Kyle McCord or anything like that, but that is what Will Howard and Devin Brown want to do. So if those guys want to be here, I would rather have the guys who want to be here and who feel comfortable enough with being here rather than the guy who would rather move on. Again, I don't hold that against him. He wanted to move on. Let him move on. Bring the guys in who want to be here. The other misconception is one that many rival fans will say, and I've even heard some Big 12 fans say, because Big 12 fans are trying to talk smack to Ohio State, which, whatever, that's fine, take your jabs. But at the end of the day, people are saying that Will Howard was beat out by a freshman. That's just simply not true. Will Howard started the entire season last year, even after Avery Johnson came in and had 5 rushing touchdowns in one game against, who was it? The Texas Tech. Even when they had 5 rushing touchdowns against Texas Tech, Will Howard still started games after that. This wasn't a situation where Avery Johnson had come in and he was just the brand new starter. And so at the end of the day, Will Howard was not somebody that was just Kansas State's leftovers. You're telling me that Ohio State and USC were in a transfer portal battle for Kansas State's leftovers? That makes no sense. Both USC and Ohio State wanted this guy. If you don't believe that Ryan Day has the ability to see how good a quarterback is, go look at Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley has a pretty good track record with quarterbacks too. And so if he's looking at this guy, it was thought that Will Howard was going to go to USC at one point. He went on a visit there. Obviously, this was somebody that Lincoln Riley saw something in and wanted, and for whatever reason, he went away from that. Will Howard was also graded as a 3rd to 5th round pick in the NFL draft this year. This year, he was graded as a 3rd to 5th round pick. That would have made him somewhere around the 5th or 8th best quarterback in the NFL draft this year. He was told that he got those grades back from the NFL in an interview that he did with the podcast. Avery Johnson, let's also think about him for a second. This isn't just some freshman Joe Schmo. This is the highest rated recruit Kansas State has ever gotten since Josh Freeman in 2006, another NFL quarterback that they had at one point. So this isn't just some Joe Schmo Avery Johnson who, just came onto the scene and, was a walk-on and started playing well. This is a kid that was very, very talented in high school and decided to go to Kansas State and play there. So was there going to be a competition? Most likely, yeah. I mean, when you have somebody that is that highly rated as a quarterback, there's going to be a competition there. There's going to be somebody who comes in and says, I want to battle here. But let's also remember that Will Howard went to Ohio State knowing there would be a competition there as well. He saw Devin Brown burn the boats. He probably heard from Ryan Day. If Ryan Day was going to say it's going to be an open competition with Kyle McCord, I highly doubt that he would say it wouldn't be an open competition with a transfer quarterback coming in. I mean, Will Howard was consistently recruited over. He was a 3-star out of Pennsylvania who he believes was an underrated recruit, which is great. But at the end of the day, he had some high highs. He won the Big 12 championship for his team, right? He started as a freshman with no spring ball because of COVID. It's not like he just completely missed it. There was no option of spring ball. There was no spring ball for the team or anything like that because of COVID. And he had 4 TD passes versus a playoff team in Texas in overtime last year. Now, we could talk about how Texas didn't have the best secondary in the world last year. That was still a playoff team. That was still a team that if you demoralize a team enough because you are good enough, they just they have nothing that they can do. Will Howard was still able to throw 4 touchdown passes against the Texas team who went to the playoffs that many people thought was going to go to the national championship. A lot of people were picking them to beat Washington, but they couldn't get it done. But this was still a playoff team that Will Howard was able to do this against. And it was also with some low lows. Like I said, he was pulled in the Texas Tech game. Avery Johnson came in, got 5 rushing touchdowns. If you watch the game, one of the reasons why that happened is because Texas Tech, for whatever reason, decided to play the entire game with 1 safety deep and have no spy coverage on Avery Johnson. Well, Avery Johnson is fast enough that he's going to outrun your linebackers, especially at a place like Texas Tech, where they don't generally get the most athletic guys in the world to play linebackers. Generally, you probably need a safety or somebody like that to keep up with the athlete that Avery Johnson is. And so at the end of the day, Will Howard could have lost the job after that, but he didn't. And he competed and he continued to work hard and he continued to be the best player he could be. And then the lowest of lows that he experienced at Kansas State, I would argue, is he went 0 for 3 in the last 4 plays of his final drive at Kansas State with a late interception at versus Iowa State. If you watch that game, if you remember what happened, it was a very difficult scene. It was an emotional scene for Will Howard and something that was hard for him to go through, no doubt. But at the end of the day, I want to make this clear. I'm rooting for Kyle McCord. I want Kyle McCord to have a good season this year. I want Kyle McCord to make it into the NFL. Am I rooting for Kyle McCord like I was rooting for Joe Burrow at LSU? Kinda. I mean, I want to see the kid do well. I want to see him be able to play well and have a good year and be able to make it to the NFL. Why would I root against him? I have no reason to. Some people might start rooting against him because they don't want the rivalry banter. They don't want the thought of, did Kyle McCord, should he have stayed? At the end of the day, it's just preposterous. Ohio State moved on from Kyle McCord. Kyle McCord moved on from Ohio State. It felt like it was something that was most likely a mutual interest thing. And this is what's better for everybody. This is a better situation for Kyle McCord to move on. This is a better situation for Ohio State to bring in Will Howard, to bring in or to have Devin Brown there competing for the starting quarterback position. Kyle McCord doesn't constantly need Ohio State fans in his mentions. Kyle McCord doesn't constantly need Ohio State fans critiquing his game, going after him, and he doesn't need people propping him up to be this, rivalry banter for somebody else. Now, is that something we love about sports? Yes, it is. But at the end of the day, unless Kyle McCord goes out there, finishes 3rd or 2nd in the Heisman or something like that, I won't be convinced that Kyle McCord that it would have been better for Kyle McCord to stay at Ohio State rather than what Ohio State has now. So Ohio State fans, move on. Don't think about it. When people bring it up, it is what it is. Just move on, because at the end of the day, it's a preposterous argument. It's not realistic. It's not something that is even going to happen. And at the end of the day, the misconception that Ryan Day moved on and fired Kyle McCord, it's not even true. It's not something that is being reported as fact. It's something that people have made up to try and take at Ohio State. Welcome to the big time. It is what it is. We're going to have fun with it. Wish Kyle McCord nothing but the best and hope Ohio State has a national championship season this year like we wanted.